adblock, the way to block ads from the internet and your applications and so on. But what's the best way of ad blocking? To begin with, there's browser-based ad block. I'm going to talk specific about uBlock Origin because uBlock Origin is like one of the most recommended ones. It's what I use, and well, in my experience, has been like really good. Now, uBlock Origin is an ad blocker. It allows you to, among other things, block ads, which it does very well. You can also block trackers. You can also like get rid of like annoying like cookie boxes and like, oh yeah, accept our cookies and whatever bullshit on the sites. You can block that. You can do all kinds of things with it. It's really powerful, and you can customize a lot of like what it blocks. You can add manual filters, manual things to block. You can remove things, like remove elements from a site and make them not visible to you, and all kinds of things. So there's really a lot you can do with uBlock Origin, and it's free and it's open source, and it's just, you can just use it. It's great. But the important question is, what's the good and bad of using a browser plugin like uBlock Origin? What's good about uBlock Origin and what's bad about it? So the good thing with this, it blocks everything really well. Like, you know, if I go on YouTube, I go on Twitch, no problem, no ads. I go to like totally legal anime sites, no like pop-ups, no ads, no new like tabs opening for no reason. Like, it works very, very well. And in contrast, when I go like without an ad blocker on a browser, for example, using just like, you know, disabling it on my browser, I get ads, I get pop-ups, I get all kinds of things that I don't want. So uBlock is really powerful. It really works well, but there's some drawbacks. Number one, the biggest one, is that it only runs in your browser. So if you have like ads anywhere else in your system, for example, if you're on your phone and you're trying to, you know, you have apps with ads, your browser extension isn't going to block any of that. I do believe you can install it on like mobile Firefox. If I'm correct, I'm not sure, but like it won't block obviously any other apps. So, you know, it's very tightly limited to that one browser. And also you have to manually go install the extension from the extension store. And you might have like, depending on what you want to block, you might have to like go into the uBlock settings, which like going into extension settings isn't always the most intuitive process. And yeah, also supposedly it doesn't work as well on Chromium browsers as it does on Firefox. Now, I did some very brief testing on Chromium because I have used this with Firefox, but it seems to work fine as well. But in theory, it works less well on Chromium browsers because Google, among other things, is fighting against ad blockers because they hate people. Um, but yeah, that's one type. I think that's the like very basic ad blocker. I think you absolutely should have that in most cases because it works very well. It's easy to get. It's just quick. But then there's another type of ad block, which is a browser that actually has built in. So if you don't want to go through a trouble of installing an extension to your current browser, and you just want something that like just runs, like you just download the thing and it like you download the browser, you run your exe file, whatever, and it installs, and then you already have adblock built in. Or like you're building a new machine and you just want an adblock ready to go, or like installing new operations, whatever. Like if you just want a built-in adblock, there's browsers that do this. The example that comes to my mind, the one I know, is Brave. So Brave is a Chromium-based browser that does all the things beyond just adblock, but in context of this video, it comes with an adblock built in. So you can have an adblock built into the browser, like from the get-go. The good thing with this is you don't have to configure anything. You just like download it and then it will block ads. The bad side is it won't be as good as uBlock. And this is from my experience, at least not as good as uBlock on Firefox. Because like, for example, I have never seen like a YouTube ad on it. But that's after I had to change the configuration to block not normally, but to block aggressively. Because like there's the icon for it, just like an extension icon, where you can like do some configuration. So you can configure between standard blocking, which really isn't that good, and aggressive blocking, which then like brings it to where like it should be, I think. But even then, I like very rarely, very, very rarely, but occasionally, like on my totally legal anime sites, get like a pop-up or like a new page opening, which I have never in my life had with uBlock and Firefox. So I don't know if it's, maybe that's also what like uBlock could do to Chromium. I don't know because I only did very brief testing, but maybe it's worse. I don't know, but like it works mostly well, but it is a little bit worse than Firefox and uBlock. Like it is a little bit worse. Also, the amount of features in the like ad blocker is a little bit lower than uBlock. Again, like the most basic stuff, like blocking those like pop boxes, blocking ads, all that is fine. But there's some minor features that you might not be able to get with it. But you'll probably be fine. I think the biggest benefit of this is that you just get the thing directly. You don't have to configure anything. The bad side is it's that one browser. It's not an addition to your existing browser. It's something you have to get a different browser for it. It's going to be only on that browser, and you're kind of stuck with that. But the good thing is, if you don't want this, if you want something on a different browser, just go get uBlock Origin. It's a very clear choice. Like, and it's only really a choice if you're like starting from a new browser. If you just want something built in, then Brave is great. There's also some other ones, but Brave is the one I would recommend because it's open source, mostly privacy respecting. They're a bit weird with some of their stuff, but I guess it's good. Next, we have mobile ad blocking because, as mentioned, like having ad block in your browser is great. Like being able to block in your browser, I mean, that's most of my use. That's where most of, for example, where I go is needed. But what if you have like applications on your phone that are not your browser that you need to block? I mean, your desktop, you probably don't have too much of this, but on your mobile phone, like if you use your phone more than I do, more from the very basic things, you almost never know what to do. So for this, you can get something like Adaway or any other like ad blocker. The one I have is Adaway. Again, like a nice free open source one. Now, the good thing with these is they work outside of your browser as well. So they actually block actual applications and they have wider use case in that sense. But there's some negatives as well. I think the main ones is that one, these Adaway at least has doesn't block ads super well. For example, if I go to Instagram on my Firefox with uBlock, I don't get the like sponsored post ads. If I go on my phone Instagram app with Adaway, I get them. You can add in manual filter lists. I could add in more filters to copy the exit filters from my uBlock and have it block everything, but by default, it's not as blocking. And also, the fact is that there's some practical limitations due to how Android is as a phone, and if you're an iOS, then I guess you have it even worse. So you can either have rooted phone, where you can modify the host file, which is a thing in Linux, which is like a file that points to, like, you can point different things to, like, addresses to certain IPs, so you can like kind of go and block things there. But you need root access on your phone, which has some security issues as well. And it's definitely not something a regular user would have. Like if you are like a competent user and you want to root your phone anyway, like then this will mostly work fine. It won't consume much battery. It will just modify your host file. It will all be good. But in most cases, you won't have root access. And if you don't have root access, then you have to run some VPN. This has a number of disadvantages, a number of problems. Number one is the use of battery, because you're running some VPN, it's consuming additional battery, and not so little bit. It actually, like running this consumes a lot more battery. Like your battery life is going to be cut down significantly if you're using ad blocker as a VPN. So it's not good to like run it constantly, and it just kind of becomes a pain. And then also it blocks a VPN. So if you for some reason want to use a VPN on your phone, for example, like I was when I was in China, to access outside sites, you need to run a VPN. You need to run a VPN, but you cannot run an ad blocking VPN and an actual VPN at the same time. So if you need to run a VPN, like an actual VPN, you can't do that if you're using adblock VPN. So you have to like give up the adblock to use the VPN. So you can't like have these two things running simultaneously, and that's a problem. And overall, like mobile ad blocking is a bit of a pain compared to just web browser ad blocking. And lastly, we have network ad blocking. So blocking ads in your network is a very effective way of ensuring it for everything in your network at once. So examples is like, I think one of the most popular examples is Pi-hole. It's also something I have deployed in my home back in Finland. So Pi-hole is basically you deploy it on a computer, Raspberry Pi, some like mini server, whatever you want to, even your router. You just put it on there, and then it will start blocking off a bunch of like ads and trackers and so on. And it will block it from everything that in your network that goes through the default DNS. So it works at the DNS server, and it basically redirects your network traffic like requests to Pi-hole, which will then connect itself to another DNS, and like it will basically bring you. Basically, you're just like when you're like a website connects to you, it doesn't go to you directly. It goes to your DNS server, where it decides, okay, this is what actually is being pointed to, and then that gets sent to you, and then your computer accesses it. But what Pi-hole will do in that between stage is to act like the middleman. It will basically just block some of the things. So if just like an ad that is in the filter list, it won't send that to you. So it will actually keep that to itself. It will not let it get to your computer. So your computer, your phone, whatever you're connected, actually won't get the ad because it's being blocked in the network before it even gets to the device. Now, the big issue with this approach, like the major complication, is the fact that one, it's bypassed if you run like a custom DNS to something else on the outside. So if you manually set your DNS for some reason, it's going to be messed up. Two, it's not going to work if you don't have the hardware to run it. If your router doesn't have like enough like power to run it, and if you don't have a separate device to do it, then you can't do it. Like you need hardware to run it on. And the third, and I think the biggest point here, like the biggest issue with it, is the fact that it requires configuration. You need to like know how to put up like how to deploy like server software, or like you need to know how to deploy it, or like you need to deploy that on whatever hardware you're using. Then you need to be able to have the competence to direct your routers like DNS to it, and then make sure that your devices are going through that DNS and not like through something separate, and so on. So it requires a bit of setup, like a lot of setup actually, and also it's just it lacks some of the flexibility features that like a browser adblock would. For example, you can't just like go and immediately go remove like website elements with Pi-hole like you can with, for example, uBlock Origin. So what is the conclusion? What is the best way to block your ads? Well, my answer is don't just do one. Like these are not mutually exclusive. I mean, you probably just need to pick between like, do you want to run your browser like extension? Do you want to run uBlock Origin, or do you want to run like Brave or something? You can pick either of those. I find uBlock and Firefox is the best way to block ads straight up. But if you want to do like Brave browser or anything, or like Chromium with uBlock, like that's totally viable. Like it's not actually awful. Like some people are making it out to be. It's like it's fine. You can do that. And then you can add on to it on your phone. You can run also an ad away. You can also run a mobile application to block ads. You don't like you can run your desktop. You can run ad blocker on your mobile phone browser. You can run ad blocker, and then you can also run like an ad blocker app on your phone. Then you can also run Pi-hole in your home network if you have the competency. So if you are like technically competent, or if you're interested in becoming competent and like learning how to like put stuff up in your network, then you can go ahead and run that.